I'm super excited to be here with you in person today. Definitely based on sort of all the excitement that I saw yesterday on the dance floor. Ashu, by the way, you have some dance moves. I did not know that. That has to go on your Eightfold profile. And I'm excited to actually endorse you on that skill. So I'm super excited to actually talk to you about some of the cool stuff that we're building here at Eightfold. I mean, there's a lot of activity behind the scenes. The engineers and the product people, as well as all of the feedback that you provide, all of that goes into the kinds of things that we build at Eightfold. In terms of, let me see, all right. In terms of sort of, everything that goes into building product, it really starts out with the mission of the company, right? Which is to enable the right career for everyone in the world. And I'm sure you've heard of this now during day one, and you'll hear about this in many of the other sessions that we do. But when you apply this to our product, what it really means is that what we're trying to achieve is that for every single touch point that we have with your candidates, that we have with your employees, that we have with your recruiters, we're thinking about ways in which we can actually make this mission come true. How can we enable this transformation for every single person that we touch? And so when we talk about our products today, you'll see that this is really goes behind every single thing that we build. So I know there's a lot of new people here. Some of you have already been using Eightfold products. Some of you may not be familiar with our platform. So I just want to take a few minutes to just spend on what does the platform actually do. We were the first company to effectively put together the authoritative data sources that exist within the walls of your enterprise, your applicant tracking systems, your HRISs, your vendor management systems. Effectively take all of this data, unify it in one place, and then also combine it with all of the data that exists about your employees, about your candidates on the public web. The reason that this is so powerful is that when you start out with this comprehensive representation of every individual, you don't just treat them as a data point. You start to see the patterns of what are they good at, what are they capable of doing next in their careers. And effectively, you're able to then utilize this data to make the best decisions. The really interesting thing here is that the individual doesn't necessarily have to give us that data. All of this data is also informed by patterns of other people that have held similar roles. For example, if there's a data scientist that we've seen that effectively didn't submit a resume or submitted a really thin resume, but the fact is that we've seen other data scientists at your company, we can start to infer their potential, their capabilities, and their skill sets. And that's really where the power of the platform comes in. On top of this platform, we have built several different applications. So we started out with talent acquisition, right, which is the standard use case that you run into, going from tens or hundreds of millions of profiles down to the 50 or 100 that matter. That is really where we started out as a company, really trying to make that process simple and helping each one of your recruiters get to the right people faster. Over the course of the last couple of years, we've invested in several other areas, including talent management. This started out with really focusing on internal mobility as a use case. But then very quickly, we realized that it's more than that. It's about making your employees better at their everyday jobs and how we can continue to make them upskill and reskill themselves so that they're ready for the jobs of tomorrow. And then over the course of the last year, we also added in Talent Flex. One of the things that we realized is that during the pandemic, many of our customers and many businesses had to go through massive transformations. And the thing that happens with massive transformations is that there also is a lot of uncertainty. Are you making the right investments? Flexibility is something that a lot of our customers valued during this time. And our Talent Flex product was able to effectively come in and offer that flexibility, use the same power of the platform to find you the right contractor for any flexible role that's open within your company. Now, while all of this is happening, and you saw Josh cover a whole bunch of the economic trends, I'm not an economist, so I won't be doing that today. But I briefly want to just cover what we are all facing right now. Obviously, you've seen sort of what the stock market's been doing. Economic uncertainty is here to stay right now. It's a very weird market, just as we've seen with all those data points that somehow don't actually make sense, but that is the world that we face today. Remote and hybrid work are actually here to stay. If you actually look at data on job descriptions from 2 years ago, they don't actually look like the job descriptions of today. There are many more jobs that are effectively allowing remote work. Simultaneously, there's been a shift in the nature of jobs. Just if you look at the types of employees that you're hiring today, we heard yesterday from EY about sort of how the half-life of skills has been going down. And that got accelerated by the pandemic. many jobs are completely different than what they looked like just a couple of years ago. And across all of this, CHROs are also having to contend with the return to work and how they can be competitive in a world where companies like Airbnb are announcing that they're going to allow people to move anywhere and effectively keep the same salary that they have today. All of these changes are happening around us, and obviously our customers are trying to think about how can they navigate through all of these changes in the world. So at Eightfold, we've been thinking deeply about what are the themes we should be investing in over the course of the next year to prepare our customers for all of these shifts that have been happening in the broader landscape. Our first theme today is AI-powered communities, which is really about how we can leverage the data, your data, as well as the public data that we possess, to help you build communities that allow for evergreen hiring. We know for a fact that right now, with all the economic uncertainty that exists, that it's really hard to make investments and say, let's open 1,000 requisitions. How can you actually leverage the data to effectively get ahead of your competitors and use AI to actually hire all the time, even if a requisition doesn't exist? We're also going to be talking about upskilling, which is obviously a major theme. You've heard this over the course of the last day. Upskilling and reskilling tend to be a huge area of focus right now. We have some exciting new announcements in this space that I'm going to talk about shortly. And then lastly, at Eightfold, we are always thinking about innovation with our customers. And so today, we're going to be talking about some of the use cases that we've come up with over the course of the last year that are really focused on expanding the Eightfold platform. You've heard about some of these use cases over the course of the last day or so, and I'll be diving deep into what are some of the products that we have actually built in this space. Let's start with AI-powered communities. So again, during the pandemic, something interesting happened, right? Which was some of the first teams that got hit with the correction were talent acquisition. Many recruiters were effectively told that there was no job for them. A lot of our customers had to go through this reconfiguration of what does it mean? And right now, with all the economic uncertainty that's going on, it's very hard to actually make the kinds of decisions to say that you're going to actually invest in building the next phase of your company. So we at Eightfold have been thinking about what is the right product at this stage to actually bring to market so we can help our customers navigate this uncertainty. And that's where our AI-powered communities product comes in. What we're going to be doing here is effectively combining the power of your data, the millions of resumes that you may possess in your database, and effectively take those resumes and based on criteria that you set, create communities. What does that actually mean? So take, for example, software engineers, which is, again, one of our favorite examples here at Eightfold. Using the data that you already possess, you can set criteria to say that you want to hire software engineers in Silicon Valley. Once you set that up, the algorithms will work behind the scenes and automatically find all of the software engineers in your database and effectively enter them into a community. What you're then able to do with this is to effectively set rules for how you can nurture this community and actually get this community to engage with your company. So what does that actually mean? We know for a fact that sometimes software engineers tend to be pretty nocturnal, right? So they're up late at night when your recruiters are asleep. And so imagine if a software engineer that you've been targeting happens to also be a diverse candidate, actually just shows up in the middle of the night on your career site. Your recruiters are asleep at this time. Just remember, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. And this is all they do. They just come up here, browse a few jobs, and then they leave. Well, with the communities product, what will happen now is that candidate will automatically get triggered a nurturing email. They can get the email effectively and ask them to invite them to actually apply to a role at your company. Complete that. So again, taking a page out of the marketing playbook, and I know, Ashu, you talked about how a lot of your career was focused on getting people to buy stuff. Well, now we're utilizing some of that technology to get people to actually apply to jobs. And that is effectively completing the circle here in terms of making sure that you can build relationships with these candidates and actually get them to engage with your company, even when your recruiters are asleep. Moving on to upskilling. So again, every CHRO and every CEO has been thinking about this over the course of the last couple of years. Obviously, this has been an extremely, extremely important area for many, many companies. Now at Eightfold, over the course of the last couple of years, we have been on a journey as well in terms of figuring out how to help customers navigate this space. In the last couple of years, we have launched a number of products, including our Career Hub product, which was really our foray into talent management. What we focused on here was really the journey of the employee, giving them a place where they could come in and effectively talk about their hopes and dreams, talk about effectively what they wanted to do in the future, the skills they wanted to build, and effectively give them the real estate where they could then consume the type of content that could actually get them there. If they're ready now, maybe they can see a job. If they need a few skills that they need to expand, they can consume coursework. They can also get practical training through gigs. And if all of that's not enough, they can also get mentorship. This is where we started out as a company which was really focused on how can we help this particular employee realize their dreams. But then very quickly we realized that the problem was actually much larger than that, which was for companies, this was about creating a living, breathing representation of every single employee skill set. So we created this dynamic employee profile where for every action that the employee took, whether it is engaging with coursework, mentorship, or with effectively engaging with gigs, all of that data started to push back into their profile and started updating their skills. And this created that complete picture of what is this employee capable of today, what are their hopes and dreams for the future, and how can we as Eightfold and you as the employer, how can you connect the gaps between that? In addition to this, over the course of the last quarter, we also invested in tools that really made it possible for the employer to have a representation of every single role within the company. And this was our Jobs Intelligence Engine product, which we brought to market over the course of the last quarter. What this really does is that it actually learns from your own data, all the job descriptions that you have out there. It also learns from industry data as well as global data in terms of what does it actually take to be successful in any particular role. So for example, a software engineer, what are the skills that they require to be successful in that role, as well as what are the proficiencies required to be successful? And what are the differences between a software engineer 1 and a software engineer 2 at your company? Giving you the power of that global data set and pulling all of that data in one place now makes it possible to create this living, breathing representation of every role. And why is that important? Because once you have this representation, when you start to combine it with the employee data, the skills data that exists on our platform, this is what effectively starts to give you a picture of where are people today relative to the roles that they occupy. What are the gaps that exist in their skill set, and how can they get better every day at the jobs that they occupy today? But we didn't stop here. We are now super excited to announce that we're also going to be focused on creating real-time assessments and bringing this to market. Now, what you're able to do is to actually see these gaps in real time. Every employee will be able to see where they stand relative to the roles that they occupy, what are the gaps that exist. All of these inputs can come in through either automated assessments, manager assessments, or even self-assessments. And effectively, all of this data flows back into that same centralized profile. What you're able to do with this data is not only see this at the individual level, but actually see this at the department level, at the business unit level, and effectively make decisions even at the company level. And that's what's exciting about this, is that we know for a fact that skill gaps are something that people talk about a lot, but actually translating that into something where the rubber actually meets the road, that's been the hard part. And that is what we're bringing to market over the course of the next quarter or so. The second thing we're also going to be pairing this with, which is also super exciting, and I'm super excited to announce today, is the idea of development plans for these employees. What do you do once you actually figure out that there is a skill gap? Well, for the manager now, you will have powerful tools where you could effectively set up development plans at the level of a skill. And the reason that this is so cool is that effectively you can measure and track progress towards the actual filling of the skill gap. Surface the gap, allow the employee to actually take remedial action on filling the gap, and then actually measure, has that gap been filled, with effectively time being the dimension of how long does it take them to actually fill that gap. And that is the really cool part about this, which is you'll be able to track that progress at the individual level. And then obviously this flows into the overall data set where a CHRO is able to see the progress that the company is making as a whole. In addition to this, we're also, as a data and AI company, we're taking all of this data and starting to see the visualizations that matter at the leadership level within companies. Now you can see for the critical skills that you need to build for the future, how are you actually trending? How are those skills actually being built over time? Which are the skills that you're potentially gaining? Which are the ones that you're losing? And how are you doing versus the upskilling goals that you've set? This is, again, something that we think takes this upskilling value proposition and actually makes it real for the very first time. And that's what we're super, super excited to do with all of our customers going forward. That brings me to the third theme of the day, which is to expand the use of the Eightfold platform. So again, the same underlying platform that I covered in the beginning of the presentation, where we combine the data that exists within the walls of your enterprise, along with this public data set, can actually be utilized in a lot of different ways. We have some customers here that we've been partnering with to build new applications of the platform, some of which you may have heard over the course of the last day or so. So let's dive into a few of these today. The first one is with EY. You heard about the work that we're doing on skills. Well, this is another project that we've actually undertaken with EY. So EY has this really interesting problem, which is massive company, 300,000 plus people, and they have to make decisions every day on how to staff projects, right? Because that's how they run their business. It's a services business, and they need people with certain skills that can do certain jobs. Well, the way that this process has actually been done up to now is that there's human beings behind the scenes called resource managers that effectively look at these requirements coming in and manually match these people to the projects that exist. Well, one thing that you may have read in research is that the average human being can actually remember about 150 names. Very quickly, you start to get to a point where 300,000 person organization, we can't keep track of all of the names of all of the people. You start to break down all of the skills, and now you get to the point where you have millions of skills, maybe even tens or hundreds of millions of skills, that a human just has no ability to track and understand how to do this matching. So this is where Eightfold partnered with EY. And effectively, what we're doing is, again, providing transparency on all of the skills that exist within the organization, and then to start matching at the level of the project. So for example, if you need an audit project staffed, who are the people that have the right certifications? Who are the people that have the right skill sets and the right sets of experiences? Can we surface them to the human beings, the resource managers, so that they can make this decision without that bias and without effectively knowing who these people are? That is the problem that we're solving on the platform with resource planning with EY. The second use case is also an exciting one. I briefly mentioned this in the AI session yesterday, but Heidrick & Struggles, which is one of the largest executive search firms in the world, they came to us and they partnered with us on this application, which was, we know for a fact that succession planning tends to be done behind closed doors. There's always an asymmetry of information here. You don't know all of the execs that may actually be available for that next role, and you can't actually tell them that this position may actually open up because that information has not been announced. In a lot of public companies, this is material information that may impact the stock price, so you can see why companies are very secretive with this. But again, this is a problem that AI and actually data can solve. And this is what we ended up doing with Heidrick, which is we built out effectively a system that understood the skills of every single employee within our mutual customers. We figured out, using Heidrick's data, what does it actually take to be successful in a particular executive role, which again, given the fact that they're an industry leader, they possess this data to help people make better decisions. And then we combine this in a way where you could effectively take this data and start to make sense of it and suggest all of the people that may actually be the right fit for a particular role, taking into account diversity, taking into account fairness, taking into account what is the impact and what is the goal that the organization is trying to drive. This is the first step in solving some of the underrepresentation that exists at the executive level. And again, we're super, super excited to have partnered with Heidrick on this particular use case. The third one I want to talk about is one that's actually my favorite use case. I'm actually a huge fan of the Netflix show, Space Force. I don't know if any fans exist here. I think the Space Force may actually be in the room, a few of them. At least they were here yesterday. They were definitely on the dance floor as well. What we've done with Gig Eagle is obviously awesome, which is utilize the same underlying data, which is people data, skills data, to match people with the types of gigs that the military needs filled over the course of the next decade. And the ability to do this with creating this profile for service members, understanding their skill sets, translating them into effectively the civilian skill sets that are necessary, understanding sort of what the availability of talent is, and creating that match using our AI. That's something that, again, we as a company are super, super proud of. And effectively, again, this is another use case where we've expanded the platform substantially, utilizing the same algorithms that we build new applications for you on the talent acquisition and talent management side. But the innovation doesn't stop here at Eightfold, right? We continue to innovate on new ideas and new things with our customers. So if you have ideas today on things that you want to do, I definitely want to hear them. The other thing that's also a tradition at Eightfold that we are super proud of is hackathons. You know, we used to do these before the pandemic with our customers. Our customers used to come over and actually hack with us. These are sessions that happen over the course of just a handful of days. We have engineers, we have product managers, salespeople, go-to-market people. They all come together, and they just come out with ideas on what Eightfold should actually solve for next. The last one that we did actually happened over the course of the last, it happened in February. So there's one that we'll be doing very, very soon. And it resulted in innovations like the ones that you see on the screen here, which is it improved the recommendation system by doing something called activity-based recommendations. The idea that interaction of your candidates with our recommendations actually improves the recommendations is something that an engineer built. They translated this into action in just 48 hours. And this is what continuously improves the user experience at Eightfold. We started measuring this and effectively have taken this into the actual product today. The second one is also really, really cool, which is the ability, giving our customers and our partners the ability to create applications without writing a single line of code. You may have heard that hiring engineers is a pretty difficult thing to do in this market. Is anybody hiring engineers here? Well, if you now want to write applications on the Eightfold platform, very, very soon, you will be able to do this without actually writing a single line of code. The ability to simply set conditions, to effectively set these workflows, and use this workflow automation to effectively take certain actions on our platform. This is another innovation that happened in just a handful of days on the platform, and again, something that we are super, super excited by. And then the last one is actually my favorite one, because it actually contains our co-founder and our CTO, Varun, his profile. What you see on the right-hand side of the screen here is actually not written by a human being. It was actually done by AI. This summarization, like Varun has extensive experiences. He's a very well-known personality within the tech space, right? He actually built out the algorithms at Facebook that effectively get us to consume more and more of the Facebook feed. So you can blame him for some of that. Well, with AI, what we're able to do here is to actually summarize his experiences. And all of this was written by a machine. No human was involved in actually writing this. And as you can see, the second little tidbit there, which talks about the fact that he was responsible for ranking updates from the team, right? And effectively, his role as engineering director on the newsfeed. That was automatically picked by the AI as something that you should know about him. So that's kind of where the technology is going, which is you just see this massive, massive ability for AI to solve some of these problems, summarize it, and effectively make it possible for us as human beings to quickly, at a glance, understand the backgrounds of people. This is another hackathon project that, again, made it out in just a handful of days. So with that, what I'd love to do is to actually invite you, our customers, to hack with us the next time we do this. And we'll be doing one very, very soon. So if you have ideas for the kinds of things that we should be doing next with you, we would love to hear from you. I'm going to pause there, and I will take questions over the course of the next 10 to 12 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, Stacia Gar. Was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the skills assessments and how that's going to work, and are you using existing models from other sources, and what sort of breadth of skills are you going to be assessing?
Yeah, so short answer is we've already been doing this on the talent acquisition side of our business. So the ability to effectively trigger, like, for example, coding assessments with partnerships that we've had, for example, with CodeSignal, with HackerRank, et cetera. We will be effectively leveraging some of the same technology from the talent acquisition side on the talent management side. We are effectively expanding the sets of types of assessments that we can do. In fact, we have some with Heidrick and Struggles as well, that is, in terms of executive assessments. Those are the kinds of things that we'll be bringing to market. And again, if you have ideas for the types of assessments that you need as a customer, we will continue to invest there as well.
Sachit, thanks. Follow up to that. So as we hear about the bias relative to hiring managers, et cetera, I'm wondering, like, as you think about that assessment piece, we still have bias relative to iterator reliability, bias of the assessor, self-assessment versus manager assessment, et cetera. And so as we look at the reliability of that content, and we think about AI's use in supporting hiring without bias, right? How do we think about AI's use in assessment without bias?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point that you touch upon, because one of the areas that we get effectively pushed into quite a bit from a customer perspective is to actually use the AI to basically project skill proficiency, right? So thinking about it from the perspective of stripping out the bias, stripping out effectively the sort of the human inefficiency that comes from this process, and effectively using the data at scale to start making decisions on how good is somebody at a particular skill. Now, clearly, that is a very, very difficult area of AI, right? And it's one that we are starting to make investments in, but it is at very much at its infancy at the moment, right? So what I would say is that all the data that we're collecting, whether it is self-assessments, manager assessments, third-party assessments, these are all data points that feed into the overall data set that we possess. And we're very much at the infancy of solving this problem with machines rather than effectively the bias that exists in various kinds of assessments today.
Sachit, we have a question from the virtual audience, which is, what is next for the events module?
Awesome. So we are continuing to do a lot of investment when it comes to events. You may have realized that we are now doing in-person events again, not just Cultivate, but many of our customers are doing campus hiring. They're going back to campuses for the first time in a couple of years. And there's several new advancements that we have made to our events module, including the ability to effectively schedule interviews, to do multi-round interviews. And there's a host of other features where we've combined it with our interview feedback tool, et cetera. A lot of this, in terms of a deep dive, we could definitely share with, if there's a specific question around it. But we continue to invest very, very heavily because we know how important campus hiring and in-person hiring is for many of our customers.
Hi. We're currently involved in a project where we have to demonstrate that we're adequately staffed in key roles. So we're doing a very manual exercise identifying the key work drivers and totaling up the hours of work throughout the year. And then we have to compare that with the hours available in terms of headcount. Is there any way that Eightfold can help with that kind of analysis?
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question to it so I understand it a little bit better. I'm going to put my product manager hat on for a second. And tell me more about about your company. What is the nature of the business?
I work for a bank, and it is a regulatory requirement that we show that we're adequately staffed because it's a risk issue if you aren't.
And you're doing this at the level of employees today, or are you doing it at the level of skills?
At the level of employees, we are also doing a skills assessment, and we Eightfold has it covered. But the staffing adequacy, we're finding that the only way we can do that is a very manual process.
So the short answer is this is definitely an application of the platform that is possible using the underlying data set, which is if you start to break it down into the skills required, right, for you to have adequate staffing, if you can figure out what that formula is, it's another potential expansion of the platform in that particular direction. So we should definitely talk, and if it makes sense for the broader customer base, it is something that we'll definitely consider.
Thanks.
We have another one, Kim. Can you share what you're doing around workflow automation?
Yeah, so this comes up quite a bit, which is effectively giving recruiters the tools so that they can automate some of the interactions that they have, right? So if you think about the average day of a recruiter, a lot of it is actually spent on manual tasks around following up with candidates and effectively doing things like scheduling interviews, et cetera. With the workflow automation tools that we have built in the system, what we're able to do is to actually build automation for some of these manual tasks. So for example, I think when we covered the nocturnal engineer example, someone that showed up at 2 a.m., that's an example of workflow automation, which is effectively you can set rules in the system that say if a certain action is taken by the candidate, then do this on the platform. And that is something that is a core capability of our platform going forward.
So as you've been building this platform, and it seems like talent acquisition and then talent management, and there's sort of this piece in the middle where employees get onboarded. And so, if we go to all the effort of identifying the right candidate, offering them a job, they accept. Is there anything in the thinking about the future of how do we sort of keep them excited to join in between when they've accepted the offer and when they're an employee in the core HR system and now we're managing them as talent management and those sorts of things? Any thoughts about the future there?
I think definitely when it comes to the employee engagement side, and I think you saw in Josh's presentation, there's a whole category of tools that's out there. We are definitely thinking deeply about how we can connect the journey of the candidate as they become an employee. And so there are definitely investments that we'll make in the future in this space, because obviously as effectively as a company that is focused both on the talent acquisition and talent management side, that is a clear opportunity for us.